when we pulled in, smoke was actually coming out around the hub, actually coming around this brake. So I thought, well, maybe it's just loose bolts. Thought maybe it's something we could tighten up until I took the tire off. And as you can see, the whole brake assembly and everything pretty much came out. The bearings are sitting out here on the ground. So yeah, it's a fantastic day in the neighborhood here with the Johnsons. Hey guys, welcome to Thrive and Drive. What you just saw is where we got stuck on the side of the road because we lost some bearings. Now, I do want to tell you guys that that was an experience. I learned a lot from that experience, and I want to be able to share what I learned. So hopefully you guys enjoyed part one of how to repack your bearings, and right now we're getting ready to jump into this part two of repacking your bearings. So you have probably noticed throughout this video, you've been seeing like hub assembly. I kept calling it a rotor, and I know it's not right. It's not a rotor, and there's rotors and then there's drum brakes, and I just kept calling it the wrong one. So that's the reason I put that in there, so you guys have your terminology correct when you're talking about it, because I want you all to be pros on when you guys are doing this. Hey, if you have not seen Thrive and Drive before, please, I'm asking you to join, to subscribe, and also hit the notifications button down below so that you guys can make sure to get the latest videos on Thrive and Drive. We're going to be doing a lot of videos of the how-to stuff, and then of course a lot of our travels, because we want to be able to share our travels so that we can encourage you to go out and have your adventure, enjoy life, because life is short. We're not promised tomorrow, and we really want to make sure that you guys have a great experience, and so that's the reason we want to share our traveling experience with you all. Anyways, enjoy this video, and we'll see you soon. All right, everybody, the first thing you're going to want to do is that a little crowbar that has to be kind of sharp on the end, or a flathead screwdriver. You're going to work your way around, and you're going to slowly pry this off. Now I used a hammer to kind of get underneath it and start. All right, so after you get the cap off, where the grease cert is, I just take a paper towel. Like this one has grease all the way out to the outside. Just take a paper towel and wipe that off there. Clean it off so you can kind of see what you're working with. You don't make a huge mess. That's the reason these paper towels are great. You can just wipe everything off, get it cleaned out, so you're able to kind of see what you're working with. And then of course, you can see the wire cage. What is it called again? Oh, by the way, this is my son, Jake.
Hey guys.
Jake, what is this piece here called again?
That's going to be called the spindle nut retainer.
The spindle nut retainer. And the spindle nut, Jake was correcting me, wasn't you, Jake?
A little bit. A
little bit, yeah. Our castle bolt underneath, you have to take this wire cage. So that's step number 2. We're going to take a screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, and we're going to pop that wire cage off. The spindle nut retainer, we're going to pop it off, and then I'm going to have Jake, as you can see, he's cleaning all the parts while I'm pulling it apart, so just to make it go a little faster. What do you think, Jake?
Feels like jelly on your fingers.
Like all right, kind of like a goo. Yeah. Well, let me get this knocked off, and then I'll be down to the castle bolt, or the retaining nut bolt. Once we get down to that, I'll give you step number 3. All right, so how to pop this off, you can see right in here. You can literally pry. There's a spot here you can pry. Once you start prying it, you can see it'll start lifting up. That's it. It comes right off. So yeah, so I'm going to hand this to Jake because now it's all dirty. I'm going to have him clean this off real good, make sure there's nothing wrong with it. Jake, you need to put a paper towel down.
Okay, paper towel.
You don't want to get that mess on the outside of your plastic bag. You're going to get that grease on you. All right, so he's going to go ahead and start managing them parts. This castle bolt should be, yep, as you can tell, it's about finger tight. You don't really need anything to take it off, okay? So that's step number 3. You're going to take that the castle bolt right off here, and then I'm going to hand this over to Jake. Wipe it out first, Jake, with some paper towels. Sorry, I'm giving him some orders too while I'm doing this. So as you can tell, that's it. Pretty easy, right?
Very.
So that's step number 3. Step number 4, there is a washer in here. And you'll probably have to use a screwdriver again to pop it out. Oh, the bearings will come out too, which is okay. But you're just going to use that screwdriver, work your way around. Hang on. There it is. All right. So that, as you can tell, this washer's weird. You'll see right here, there's a flat edge. There's a flat edge here, right here. And that's how that goes in. It just sits in there, and that keeps everything from just spinning right off, okay? So that's the reason there's that flat edge on that washer. All right, let me get to the next step. Just basically pull the bearings out, and then at that point, I can then remove this rotor. Actually, let's see if I can just do that. You can tell it's just going to fall right out because there's nothing there holding it in. And of course, this is your outer bearing. It needs to be cleaned. And if you look in here, Jake, give me some paper towels. Jake's going to give me some paper towels. If you look in here, that cuff that I was telling you guys about, that the bearings sit in, it is right there. Okay? And you have to inspect this cuff. All right? Have to inspect it. That means you're looking for cracks, discolorations, major like grooves. This one looks pretty good, just from my first initial look at it. But I got to wait till Jake gets it all cleaned off. All right, but that's what it looks like. That's what you're gonna look. Replace bearings. You have to replace that cuff. So if you pull the bearings out or you lose a bearing, pull this out, put the new one in. They all come in a kit. Just go ahead and replace it. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and put my phone down so I can pull the rotor off, and then we'll show you how to take the back side apart. And then you guys will be a pro at this. So as you can tell, I've already used my screwdriver, my my little crowbar to pop it off. I just find that it's easy so I don't damage my the cover, the dust cover. And then I don't want to damage that, because if you damage it, you have to replace it. So you want to make sure it has a tight seal also. All right, let's move on to the next thing. All right, Jake. Do you use an air compressor? Show them what that is.
This is the outer bearing.
That's the outer bearing. Do you use an air compressor to clean the old grease out?
No, because it can cause damage to the outer bearing on the bearing. Yeah.
It can cause damage to the outer bearing. It can cause damage to both sets of bearings. You do not use an air compressor to blow the old grease out. Do not do that. Just use a cleaner. So of course, that's what he's doing right now. He's cleaning. What I like to do is, on these rotors, is when I actually pull them off of the spindle. That's what this is right here. That's what that is. This is a spindle. That's the grease zerk again. And then of course, right here is the old outers. That's the old outer seal that I'm going to yank out. But what I like to do is set them down, as you can tell, face down. Now, you don't want to get any kind of contaminants inside of your rotor. So then if you take this rotor and look, I've stuffed a towel, a shop towel on that side of it, put it down on the ground, okay? And that's going to catch all of your old grease. All right, that rotor is dirty. We're going to clean that rotor out. We're going to inspect our brakes, give our brakes a good cleaning. We're going to clean out all this deposit from the brakes. We're going to take out that cuff, and that's going to be our next step. I believe step number 4 or 5 here. Take that out, which is pretty easy. Let me find my tool, which is right here. Make sure you keep your tools clean, so again, you're not getting any kind of contaminants. What I mean by contaminants, like little gravel and dirt and dust down inside your bearings. So all you got to do is, you basically put it in here. Well, you basically just yank it out. I probably need both hands to yank this thing out. So, and you don't want to put pressure down on your inner bearing, okay, or your outer bearing. So, all right, let me get my both hands so I can take that out, and I'll show you what's next. All right, as you can tell, I yanked out that the outer seal, or the inner seal, Jake? What seal is it? That's the inner bearing. So it'd be the inner seal.
I think this is the outer bearing.
Or the outer, no, the outer bearing's on the outside. That's for the outer bearing, yes. All right, so this is the inner bearing. So all you got to do is once you yank that seal out, you should be able to just reach in there and pull that bad boy right out. Look at that, all covered and coated in grease. Looking pretty good. It's not too bad, but you can definitely tell the grease definitely needs to be changed out on it. All right, I'm going to give this to Jake, and then basically I got to check them cuffs. All right, so once you wipe this out, as you can tell, I've kind of got it somewhat cleaned out so I can inspect it. That cuff looks that's a rag down in there. It's coated in grease. But from that standpoint, I mean, I think that cuff looks really good. It's set down in there nice. So I don't know if we're going to have to mess with that, okay? But if I had to take that out, I would take that punch, I would basically from the opposite side, I would use it and work my way around and drive that cuff out. You just work your way around with that brass punch, and you start basically on the back side, you'll just start kind of slowly tapping it, and that will fall out. That's where that cuff sits. And that's what the bearings sit in, is right inside that cuff, okay? But this one looks good, so I'm not replacing it. If I have to replace one, I'll show you, but I don't know if I'll have to. And then it's the same thing with the other side. So you got your inner outer bearing, this cuff right here. If you look at the Dexter website, it'll actually show you how to do it. And you can basically push this out and put a new one in. But from this standpoint, I don't have to do that, so we're not going to mess with it. And but again, use a brass punch. Do not use steel. Use a brass punch, and you work your way around on this cuff right here and slowly start tapping it out from the back side. So if I was going to pop this one out, I would flip the rotor completely over, and I would stick the brass punch, and on this back lip way down in here, I would start slowly driving out this cuff all the way around. You just slowly start working your way around, and it'll pop right out, and you put the new one in, and then you slowly, right up here on this edge, you would slowly start driving this cuff right back on this edge, right back, a new one right back in to the same place. Make sure you're faced the right direction where the bearing sits inside the cuff. All right, you do not want to drive one in upside down. That would be bad news. So just sit the bearing. Once you put the new one in, set the bearing in, make sure it's the right way, pull the bearing out, then use your brass punch and start slowly tapping this in until it sits in its seat all the way down. How do you tell? You take your finger, you'll reach all the way in here, and you will tell because it's sitting right up against basically the seat on the back side. All right, so I just wiped it out. What you're going to do then at that point, you make sure you clean your spindle off. Remember, that's your spindle. Of course, this is your brakes. You want to check your brakes to see how they're wearing, and mine look pretty good. They're wearing fairly even all the way around. The other thing you want to do is while you have your rotor off, you're going to spray and clean your brake system all the way off, okay? And one thing you don't want to get any grease on these. You don't want to get any grease on the inside because that can ruin your brakes, and you don't want to ruin your brakes. They're pretty important, right? So want to make sure everything is clean. And then before you put everything back together, so you got to clean everything out. So Jake, say hi, Jake.
What's up?
Jake's going to be cleaning the bearings and everything that goes back into the rotor. I'm going to go ahead and do my final inspection on these cuffs, and then we're going to reassemble all of this back in the opposite order, and then I'll show you guys how to put this cuff in, or not the cuff, but the rear seal in. All right, so stay tuned. All right, everybody. As you can tell, everything is looking pretty clean. My rotor is cleaned out. There is zero grease in there. Zero grease. Maybe a little bit of the brake cleaner / degreaser stuff. It might be a little bit in there, but other than that, that's about it. It's cleaned out, ready to be put back together. Let's see Jake clean his parts real quick. Flip it over. That's all you're doing, people. Is spraying it in there, blowing. It'll basically clean the grease right out. You see that? He's wearing protective eye gear because you don't want that stuff to end up in your eyes. So, yeah. Alright, so as you can tell, red lithium grease. I'm going to take some of this out, put it in my hand. When you're going to put the bearings back together, then what you're going to do is the open face of the bearing right here. So the larger piece, you're going to basically take the grease and go around a little bit at a time, and you're going to basically push that grease inside that bearing. So that grease is then pushed up into these rollers, okay? You're going to slowly work your way around by shoving that grease in there all the way around. You know how to tell that you've got enough grease. In the very top part of this cuff, grease will start squirting out. That's how you know, okay? So on both sets, the big bearing and the little bearing, you've got to do this. On the bigger side of the bearing, you're going to start shoving grease in there, and it'll fill the bearings up, okay? All right, so I'm going to get this done, and then we'll get right back on putting these together. All right, as you can tell, like right up to the top, this is the small side of the bearing. This is the inner bearing. If you look, you have grease pushing up through there, and it's all because I kept working the grease all the way around, and it's pushed all the way through that bearing. So that bearing's good. It's completely packed full of grease. Now you got to take some of the grease. You're going to take a little bit of the grease, red lithium, high temp grease. You're going to put it down inside. Do not, whatever you do, put it in untouch anything inside the rotor, because it can ruin your bearing, ruin your brakes. You're just going to put some grease in there all the way around. That's really close, Jake. All right. You're going to sit the small part of the bearing into the cuff. All right, make sure it's nice and even. And then we'll move to the next set of setting the seal in to the inner bearing, and then we'll move on to the other side. All right, so red RTV gasket maker is high temp. You're going to put it right along that edge. So this edge right here, you're going to put it right along that edge all the way around. You want to make sure you have some of this in order to be able to put that rear seal in so the grease doesn't leak out into your rotor. All right? Now, how it doesn't leak out is because this cuff, when it goes on, if you can tell, there's a rubber gasket. And if you look inside this rubber gasket, you see there's a spring that's in there on that gasket. So when you put this on here, when you put that rotor on, and after this has been set, this will seal right up here on the top, and it will not allow, even though it's spinning, it won't allow any grease to get around that seal. That's pretty cool, huh? Pretty cool design. Whoever thought of that was a genius. So, all right, so I got to put this inside of this, and I'm going to show you how to do that after I get the sealant on it. All right, as you can tell, I have the red sealant all the way around my gasket, my inner seal, and then I have my piece of nylon, basically block. I'm going to sit right on top of that. And then I'm going to gently start tapping it in. And I'm going to check it to make sure it's flush. As you can tell, it's going in. And as you can tell, you wipe it off. How's that look, Jake?
Really good.
All right, so we have the rotor back on. We have the rear seal in. Now I want to give you guys a little tip. When you guys put this rotor on, that gasket in the back has that spring, okay? So it's going to be tight at first, so you're going to basically have to push this on till at least this where the spindle kind of sticks out, and the nipple will stick out a little bit too. So you want to make sure that kind of sticks out a little bit. If it doesn't stick out, that means that gasket in the back is not all the way sat on the spindle properly. So make sure that's set all the way on there. All right, let's move on to the next thing. We got a pack outer bearing now.
Sorry.
All right, so we good? All right, so we packed that bearing. So I know I showed you how to pack the bigger bearing. I went ahead and packed the smaller bearing. It's the same thing. You're basically packing from the larger side, and you're pushing grease inside the bearing. And then after you do that, you just sit that bearing inside here. And you say it's kind of sloppy a little bit, but who cares? It's grease. You'll basically sit that bearing in there, push it in to the cuff, and after you do that, I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of the assembly back together. Of course, you've got your washer. So our washer basically slips right in. After that, you have your castle bolts, or your spindle nut, whatever you want to call it. I call it a castle bolt because that's what it is. One thing about the castle bolts, you'll notice it's more rounded on one side and flatter on the other. The rounded side goes out. Okay? You'll spin that on. After you spin it on and you hand tighten it, then you use your torque wrench, or and you want to make sure it's set up properly. Okay, what I mean by properly, that it has 50 pounds of torque on here. So I'm going to do that real quick. I want to make sure that it has 50 pounds of torque, and then we're going to get right back to you. Dexter Axles recommend to torque the bolt down to 50 pounds of torque, and then you're going to release it off, and that's just to make sure everything is seated properly, and then you're going to back that bolt off. Do not leave 50 pounds of torque on your castle bolt, or you will ruin everything that you've done, and you'll be having to replace everything. So always remember, you're going to torque it. Now, how to use a torque? My son asked a really good question. On this torque wrench, if you look right here, it says 50. I don't know if you can see that or not. And then it has 0. You just basically, so if it was, let me scroll down. Right now, it's like at 20 pounds of torque, and I know that I need to put 50 pounds. I would basically turn this knob till it gets up to, I turned something. There we go.
Stop moving.
Turn it up to 50, which, you go a little bit more. That's 50 pounds, because it said 5. Now, if it was 53 or 51, I would go over to the next notch. That would be 51. All right, but we need 50 pounds of torque. And then all you do is you put it on the castle bolts. Did you hear the click? That means that that is torqued at 50 pounds of torque. All right, then at that point, we know everything is seated properly. You bring it back till it's just basically, you hand tighten it. All right? So just make sure it's hand tightened. That's it. That's all you put on there. Okay? That's the amount of torque is basically just finger tight, like it was when we pulled it off. And then you take the wire cage, or I call it a wire cage, spindle nut retainer. however you want to call it. I like to call it a wire cage. It's just a whole lot easier. You'll take that. You'll notice there's a flat side here, and on the spindle there's a flat side. Take your castle bolt retainer. You're going to slip it over, push. It'll go on. It's just a little hard. You just make sure I'm still finger tight. There. Just like that. Now that it's all together, your very last step, thank you, Jake, is this cup, which what I like to do is pop out the cap, take the cap, the dust cover, you're going to put it right over the top. Actually, before we do that, grab your grease gun. Almost forgot. Put it on your grease cert. You got to spin the outside of the rotor while you're putting grease in. All right, do not forget to spin this, because if you don't spin this, you're going to blow your rear seal right out. All right, this is going to take a little bit, so we'll be right back. So again, we put the grease gun on the grease cert. We filled up the rest of the rotor or the spindle area, and basically until the grease started moving, until you start seeing moving on the inside right here. Once we're seeing grease start coming out, that's when we knew to stop. When you do that, when you go to grease through this grease cert, always make sure the wheel, you're spinning the wheel or you're spinning the rotor so that the grease can come in, so you don't blow out the rear seal and fill your brake drum full of grease. So always remember that. Hey guys, hey, one other thing that I would highly recommend doing is wash your rim out. Check for any kind of cracking on the rim or any stress fractures on your on the rim, because these are aluminum. So there's a potential you could have, or even checking the back side of the rim to make sure there's no big dents in the beading that goes around the edge, because that can cause you further problems going down the road. It's just important to check your rims out, making sure you give them a good cleaning, looking for all the stress fractures, looking for all that kind of stuff, just in case you need to replace that rim. It's better to catch it while it's off there and versus going down the road and you have a blowout and then it totals out your camper or messes your camper up. We've seen that before, and that's just a horrible experience, and nobody wants to go through that. So just make sure you wash your rim, check them out to make sure that you have no issues, no hairline cracks, stress fractures, and you can look and you'll see it. I promise you. It'll stand out like clear as day when you start really looking at it. Anyways, that's just a tip that I wanted to give y'all. Hey guys, I hope that you have enjoyed this project from the standpoint of what to do, how to do it, maintaining your bearings, maintaining your axles, making sure you're inspecting your axles, your leaf springs, even your shackles, the hangers for your leaf springs. Make sure you check all that stuff. You need to check it on a regular basis while you're driving. If you're full-time, you should be checking it all the time anyways. If you're even if you're on a camping trip, you know, when you get to your place and then when you get back home, check that so you don't have an accident or something happens. But anyways, hopefully you enjoyed this. Share this with your friends. If you enjoyed it, if this is the first time you're on our YouTube channel, please subscribe. We're going to be doing a whole bunch more of how to do stuff, and we would like to share that with you guys, and we would love to hear back from you. Love to hear your opinion, what your thoughts. If you have any tips or tricks you would like to share with Thrive and Drive and the people that are on Thrive and Drive, please share. We would love to hear from you all. And subscribe, hit the notification button And we would love to see you back. We would love to have you be a part of Thrive and Drive. So we'll see you guys again. See you next week. And we'll talk to you soon. Jake, what's your thoughts? Any thoughts?
Do it with 2 people.
Do it with 2 people? Makes it go a little faster, doesn't it?
A little bit. Just so smart.
And if you're filming, it just takes a whole lot longer to do this, right? All right. Well, you all have a great day, and we'll catch you again.